Hi everybody and welcome to another video. Today I have the honor to introduce you all to Brenda Davis, who is a registered dietitian who has been in the field for over 30 years and actually wrote the first book from a registered dietitian on how to thrive on a plant-based diet, which is called Becoming Vegetarian, which is actually quite controversial at the time and probably still is today, right?
Oh, absolutely, because it was a vegan book in disguise.
Yeah, that's the way to do it.
And so we had an entire chapter called Without Meat and then another chapter called Without Dairy. How do you do this?
Yeah.
And the dairy industry just freaked out in our country, in Canada. They actually wrote a 45-page rebuttal to our book, made it free of charge to every health professional in the country, and then took out a full-page ad in our professional journal to try to discredit our work.
Sounds like they were terrified. And so they should be.
Oh, it was amazing. Well,
that's probably more publicity. That's even better.
Absolutely. And the interesting thing is, 30 years later, our professional organization, Dietitians of Canada, allowed that ad to go into our professional journal. 30 years later, my writing partner, who's now 76, was awarded, it's basically the Lifetime Achievement Award called the Riley Jeffs Memorial Lecture Award. It's the highest honor offered by Dietitians of Canada.
Wow. And the
Academy, or the association, actually apologized for ever allowing that ad to go into the journal.
Wow, that is milestone, isn't it? That's incredible.
Just the
so
change.
They should.
Oh, the change in 30 years.
And well, the change is big in Canada right now with the new, food guidelines.
Oh yeah, we're so excited. We've worked hard to reach that point, and to be honest, I wasn't sure we'd ever see it in my lifetime. So it is very gratifying and very exciting to see.
I think the level of optimism has definitely grown a lot in very recent years.
Yes.
Would that be fair to say that for many, you've been doing this for over 30 years, so is this a fair analysis that for many years it was kind of like, yeah, we're making some progress, and then in the last 5 years it's gone bang?
Bang. I would say close,
but
I did see, I would say a fairly big rise. Like, for example, you know, in the late 80s when I started, it was still considered super risky to be vegan, and you know, downright, I mean, in some respects even downright dangerous by many health professionals. And then in the 90s we saw just huge changes. Even within the American Dietetic Association at that time came out with a first statement saying that, you know, vegetarian diets were safe and adequate at every stage of the life cycle, including vegan diets, and they even used the word vegan. And so it really was, I saw this gradual rise, and then all of a sudden, whew.
Excellent.
So
that's good.
It's been quite exciting that way.
Yeah.
Some changes I can remember the days when you'd walk into a restaurant and people had never heard the word vegan.
Absolutely.
You said, you know, do you have anything vegan? They wouldn't know what you were talking about.
And now you're lucky to go a week without seeing it in the headlines in mainstream media.
All over labels, and people are marketing their foods with the banner of vegan. So
absolutely.
It's a very different world.
Yeah, very exciting times.
Yeah.
Okay, so over the years, you know, you've been doing this for over 30 years. Has much changed in what you believe about how to thrive on a plant-based diet?
No.
Really?
No.
So the information that you got back then is still what you believe today?
There are little tweaks for sure.
Yeah.
But as a dietitian, I've always been focused on making sure nutritional needs are met at every stage of the life cycle. One of my evolutions has been, now I work a lot with disease reversal as well as nutritional adequacy. So partnering those two things, and so I'm very conscious of people doing it right, because to me, when a person trying to do a vegan or a completely plant-based diet blows it, they become evidence number one for why people are justified eating meat.
Totally.
And there are a lot of young people in animal rights and so on that say, I'm doing this not for me, I'm doing it for the animals. If you care about the animals,
be the healthiest vegan you can be.
Yes, because you're the person they point to and say, well, see,
it didn't work.
You know, it didn't work.
Doesn't work for everyone.
So obviously humans need meat. And so we need to be really careful of that. We need to get it right, because we are on trial in the eyes of the world.
I completely
And until we have full generations of vegans growing up, born and raised vegan, we will continue to be on trial in the eyes of the world. We need to get this right.
Absolutely.
One B12 deficient baby sets us back 20 years.
Totally. So what do? How do we avoid that? How do we be the healthiest vegans we can be?
Well, first of all, I would say for health professionals, get educated. Be able to support people who want to eat a more ecologically sustainable diet, who want to eat a more ethically justifiable diet, who want to be super healthy. Help them to get it right. So make sure you have the resources. You are responsible for you, and ultimately, you need to get the resources and look at what is required, because nutrition education has been clearly designed for omnivores, and so it's not out there. People aren't aware of the resources necessarily, so you need to seek them out. This is one of the things that I've done in my life. I mean, I'm on my 11th book right now, but most of my books are really about getting this right. And so, for example, Becoming Vegan Comprehensive Edition, it begins with diet and disease, but then we have an entire chapter on protein, carbohydrate, fat, vitamins, minerals, and then every stage of the life cycle: pregnancy and lactation, infancy, childhood, adolescence, seniors, and then underweight, overweight, eating disorders, athletes, to cover it all. And how do you do this and get it right? And so if a person has a question about zinc or iron or B12 or vitamin D or iodine or essential fatty acids, EPA and DHA, because you're not eating fish, and so on, the answers are there and the guidelines are there. This is how you do it.
Ideally, everybody would be doing that, not just on a vegan diet, but even if, because it almost sounds like, oh, this is more trouble. We have to read books on how to be healthy, but anybody who wants to be healthy, you can't just wing it and be like, I'm just going to eat my standard what I eat. You have to figure it out.
You do have to realize that guidelines are generally created for omnivores.
Exactly.
And so they have the resources at their fingerships. So as vegans, we need to bring the resources to our fingertips.
Where do we go? Where do we go?
Exactly. And so it's not
No, I'm asking you.
Yes. So for example, with omnivores, they are at much higher risk for diseases of overconsumption. As vegans, there are a couple of nutrients we need to be more worried about, like B12. So where do we go? Well, there are tons of resources. So my books, Michael Greger's website, nutritionfacts.org. We have veganhealth.org, which is an amazingly comprehensive website on plant-based nutrition. There are just a lot of good books and resources. There are a number of dietitians who have specialized in plant-based nutrition, like Juliana Hever as well, who's here. And so there are, the resources are there. PCRM has all sorts of guidelines. There are lots of Plantrition Project has amazing stuff.
For a standard person, would it be sufficient to say, eat plants, mostly fruits, vegetables, a small amount of nuts, grains and legumes, cut out salt, oil and sugar, and eat those foods in their whole form? That's basically...
That plus B12.
And a B12 supplement.
You need to get your source of B12. And the other thing to think about is iodine as well.
Sure, so a bit of iodized salt.
Yeah, you could do that, or you could do a little bit of kelp powder if you don't want to do the salt.
Okay.
And then the other thing would be vitamin D if you're not exposed to sun on a regular basis. To think about that. So, and if you're doing, that variety of legumes and vegetables and whole grains and so forth, it covers you well.
You're good.
It's a wonderful diet.
Absolutely. And what about for something more particular, like somebody who is pregnant?
So with pregnancy, there are times in life where we think of the sort of the more vulnerable years, if you will. So pregnancy, lactation, infancy, childhood, those are times when we are more vulnerable. Our needs increase. So one of the things during pregnancy and lactation, you need to think about trace minerals like iron and zinc, but you also need to think about essential fatty acids. So one of the things that people have done over the many years is to eat fish for EPA and DHA. DHA is so important for a growing brain. And one of the bits of good news is that pregnant women have the best ability to convert plant omega-3s into these bigger, longer chain omega-3s, EPA and DHA, which is wonderful. They're actually really quite efficient converters. However, that having been said, people who are vegan do tend to have lower levels of these long-chain fatty acids in their blood, in their breast milk, and so on, in their tissues. So I would suggest, just to cover yourself, 200 to 300 milligrams of DHA a day during pregnancy.
Just to err on the side of caution.
Exactly, and then you're
easy. Is that it?
Yeah, that's it. I mean, obviously B12 is huge.
And the usual, and on top of the usual.
Yeah, because B12, if you ignore B12, you're pregnant. Your baby will be born with a B12 deficiency, and they will be permanently brain damaged within a few months. It's a huge deal.
And that's a big deal for everybody.
It's a big deal for everybody.
Not just people on a plant-based diet, but also there's a lot of people eating a meat-centered diet who are also needing to supplement B12.
Yeah, well, more people over 50, because when you get over 50, your ability to cleave the B12 off it's bound to in protein diminishes. So you can think you're getting lots of B12 from all your meat and dairy, but you're not able to pull it off of the animal products it's bound to. And so we see a lot of people over 50 who are omnivores who do end up with B12 deficiencies.
But if they just took a supplement, a spray under the tongue, for example, they would be able to absorb it properly.
Absolutely.
Excellent.
They need, as a matter of fact, they need to get their B12 from the same place as vegans do. Fortified foods or supplements.
Okay, excellent. And is there anybody who can't thrive on a plant-based diet? Is the human body best designed to consume a whole food plant-based diet?
Oh, absolutely. When you look at the longest lived, healthiest people on the planet, they're all predominantly plant-based. They're not necessarily vegan, but they're predominantly plant-based. And so what I would say is there are some individuals that are challenged because they have severe allergies, like allergies to legumes and nuts and seeds and so on, and it can be challenging. But for 99% of the population, it is not an issue to get all of the nutrients you need on a plant-based diet. And even the people who are challenged, if you have the support of a dietitian, you can create a diet
make it work.
that will work. So I would say in the vast majority of cases, not only can it be nutritionally adequate, but it's superior, because it is so powerful in terms of disease risk reduction.
Okay, and what about, so many people are hung up on keto at the moment, paleo. How does that compare, first of all, to each other, and then also to a whole food plant-based diet?
Yeah, so keto and paleo are both relatively low carbohydrate diets, because in both cases they're eliminating grains and beans. And in the case of keto, they're just, the carbohydrates are down to about 5% of calories. In a paleo, it's around the 20%. And so it's sort of two ends of the spectrum of low carb diets, with paleo being at the higher end and keto being at the lower end. And I am just so concerned about the both. I think paleo is a far superior to keto in terms of nutrition, because there's more plant foods, there's more fruits and vegetables, there's just a greater variety and a greater quantity permitted. Because what people need to understand is plant foods, the only exceptions being nuts and seeds, are essentially about, and olives and avocados, but they are essentially 60 to 90% of calories from carbohydrates. So if you look at vegetables, fruits, whole grains, beans, all of those foods are about 60 to 90% of calories from carbohydrates. Those are the foods that concentrate the very compounds we know to be most protective. Fiber, phytochemicals, antioxidants, plant sterols and stanols, all of these, prebiotics, all of these things that are so protective to human health, that's where they're concentrated. These diets are essentially minimizing those protective compounds, particularly keto, because keto is 80% of calories from fat. And so you just don't have room for plant foods in a diet like that, or very many. I mean, you can have little bits of greens and so on, but at 20 grams of carbohydrates a day, you can't eat an apple at 30 grams. You can't eat a banana. You can't eat, I mean, even a couple of blueberries has 21 grams.
Right.
So they say, oh yeah, we can eat berries, we can eat greens, but add up the numbers. Yeah, it's not a lot. And
what kind of problems can people expect from consuming a diet like that?
Well, I would expect over time, because they're fairly meat heavy and fat heavy, I would expect over time that you're going to increase your risk of chronic disease, and particularly cancer, heart disease, and diabetes. Yeah. And cancer especially, because we know it's not a question mark anymore. Processed red meat is a group 1 human carcinogen. Unprocessed red meat is a group 2A human carcinogen. So it's a probable human carcinogen. And the evidence for processed red meat is huge. It's so strong that, the World Health Organization put it in the same category as tobacco and arsenic and asbestos and alcohol as a carcinogen. So this is not, people eating keto eat processed meats. They're eating, because processed meats are so high in fat. And even people eating paleo who say, technically a paleo diet would not include processed meat. But I see people eating paleo eating pepperonis and all sorts of sausages and bacon and all that stuff.
Right. And so people get on these diets because they want to lose a little bit of weight or something like that. But a better diet would just be to eat the diet that is high in carbohydrate, low in saturated fat, zero cholesterol,
exactly.
all through plant-based diet.
And what people need to remember is that just because something succeeds in producing weight loss doesn't mean it's healthy. I mean, we used to promote cigarette smoking as a means of weight loss. Some people still do. But back in the 20s, there was all these advertisements for smoking for weight loss. You can lose weight loss. You can lose weight going on chemo. You can. There are all kinds of. You can become a heroin addict. Doesn't mean it's a good idea just because it produces weight loss. What we want is to produce health, and when you're eating a healthy diet and you're living a healthy lifestyle, you will achieve a reasonably healthy body weight. Yeah. It's a natural,
you'll achieve your ideal weight.
Exactly.
And if you want to tone up a bit, do a bit of fitness.
Yeah, exactly. And fitness isn't, to me, it's not optional. It's absolutely essential. The human body needs to move. We should be exercising for an hour every day. Right. As far as I'm concerned. I mean, I do a little more. I find as I get older, I'm 60 years old. So at 60 years old, I feel like I need to do a little more to maintain my level of fitness. But at 60 years old, I can still do the splits and handstands and headstands. And I can still run as fast as I did when I was 30.
So inspirational.
And so, this is possible. And I've achieved that by eating a healthy diet and living a healthy lifestyle over many years. So.
Fitness is something that, we don't, people who are focused on diet, sometimes they think diet's enough, and that will get you disease prevention for the most part and things like that. But also our bodies are designed to move. We should be increasing our muscle mass and our bone density. And,
that's right.
And keeping our cardiovascular fitness up.
We need to set an example that people just can't ignore. At your workplace, if you're the only person who's not on medication, who looks super fit, people will sit up and take notice.
Because it's rare. It's rare to look like that in this society that is all consuming animal products.
Absolutely. And so we, in the
what's
United
States... What's your obesity numbers, the percentages?
In Canada?
Sure.
So in Canada, it's a little less. In the States, it's over 70% overweight and obesity now.
So over 2/3 of people.
Over 2/3 are either overweight and obese, and in Canada, I believe it's around the 60.
Right.
So it's definitely lower, but it's the majority. We are, as healthy, fit, lean individuals, we are in the minority right now, which is shocking. This is the first time in history, literally. We think of malnutrition as being, some starving child in Africa who's wasting away. But there are really 3 types of malnutrition. There's hunger or starvation. Yeah. There's micronutrient deficiencies like going blind from vitamin A deficiency or some sort of severe nutritional deficiency. And the third is overconsumption. And overconsumption, which causes all of these chronic diseases and it is responsible for 70% of the deaths in the world, is now the #1 form of malnutrition globally.
Wow.
And so we really need to get this. We are killing ourselves with our knives and forks. You know, with every single cell of the human body is a product of what you put in your mouth. It's not just our fuel. It is the materials with which we build our brain cells. You know, we need to get that. It's impossible that what we eat doesn't affect how the body functions. It has to. It's what we're made of.
Very interesting. And what about, you mentioned that you've done a lot of work with people who have diabetes. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I actually wrote a book in 2003 called Defeating Diabetes. And I ended up receiving a call. A group of people called Canvas Back actually received a grant from the U.S. Department of Defense to do a diabetes research project in a country called the Marshall Islands, where they have the highest rates of diabetes in the world. And one of the medical doctors that was involved in that had just purchased my book, Defeating Diabetes. And he said, this is the person we need to design the program. And so I received this call and I ended up going to the Marshall Islands for about 8 months, and I've been returning almost every year ever since. That was in 2006. And so we did a study with 5 overlapping cohorts of lifestyle intervention versus standard care, and took these people from a very highly processed diet to a whole food plant-based diet and watched them get well. And it was very interesting. And I've been doing this ever since. I've been working in Lithuania a little bit. We just did a lifestyle intervention there for the medical school and the government, and did a big press conference in the parliament, and the parliament has now invited us to come back and actually do the same intervention for their leaders.
Whoa, wow.
So for the Minister of Health and all of the the government ministers, so it'll be interesting.
That's incredible. So you are changing people's diet and they are coming out of their diabetes illness. What would their other alternative have been?
Well, diabetes is a very, if you don't change what you're putting in your body, it's like a slippery slope where there's kind of a snowball effect with complications. And so people who have diabetes, it's like you're awash in this sugary fluid all the time, and this creates a lot of oxidative damage in the body, and it causes problems with every organ system. Your eyes, your kidneys, your large and small blood vessels. You end up with atherosclerosis, and it just goes on and on. And your wounds, when your blood is all sugary, your wounds don't heal properly. You have a little cut on your foot, and next thing you know, you've got gangrene, and you have to get your toes or your legs amputated. Wow. So it's a devastating disease. And we see kidney failure. It's the most common cause of kidney failure. It's a very common cause of blindness.
How common is this disease?
Oh, it's shocking, but 49 to 52% of adults in the United States, have either pre-diabetes or type 2 diabetes right now. It's like a tsunami of diabetes that is hitting not only developed countries, but developing countries who are adopting our Western ways. So, and the thing that I want people to know here is that this disease is totally preventable. Totally preventable, but it's also reversible. And with these chronic diseases, we used to think heart disease wasn't reversible until Dean Ornish came along and showed that you could actually reduce plaque in your blood vessels eating this whey and exercising and so forth. We know that these chronic diseases are reversible. Diabetes, probably more than any other, because it's a disease of insulin resistance. So why does the body become insulin resistant? Well, it has to do with dysbiosis or poor gut microflora. It has to do with oxidative stress and inflammation, and it has to do with lipotoxicity and glycotoxicity, and all of these things that are caused by overconsumption of unhealthy foods. That's what, it messes up your metabolism so badly that's what causes diabetes. And so people, how do they treat it? Well, a bunch of medications to lower your blood sugar doesn't touch your inflammation, oxidative stress, dysbiosis, lipotoxicity, and all of those things. In order to reverse diabetes, you must halt the drivers of diabetes. Right. And so that means, you've got to be eating in a way that reduces inflammation, reduces oxidative stress, takes the lipids that are stored in places they shouldn't be stored away. So lipotoxicity is when your body is designed to store fat in your adipose tissue, excess fat, I mean. And when that system of storage gets overwhelmed, you start to store fat in your liver and in your pancreas and in your muscle tissue, your heart tissue. And when you store fat in places it shouldn't be stored, it messes up how your body functions. And especially when lipids are stored in the liver, you get non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. You become very insulin resistant. And so if we can lower those lipids in the liver, which we can do quite easily on a really healthy diet, you can restore your insulin sensitivity. And it's, I have to tell you this story because I worked with a man. I had a young man come up to me at a conference and say, "Can you help me? I've got cancer, I'm 36 years of age. Can you help me design a diet that will give me the best chance of survival?" And I just wanted to help him. And so I said, absolutely. And Michael Clapper, he approached as well. And the two of us supported him through a transition to a very healthy plant-based diet, and his cancer went into remission. But the real story is his whole entire family said, whatever diet you're doing, we're doing with you. And this family was the ultimate foodie family. I mean, their favorite pastime was ordering the biggest steak in the fanciest restaurant in town and the, $300 or whatever bottle of wine with it. Yeah. And they're really true foodies. And so this was not a small sacrifice. This was huge. And so they all became plant-based. His father, the year before his diagnosis, had a major heart attack. He had diabetes for 20 years, diagnosed in '93. He had peripheral artery disease. He was going into kidney failure. He had a super high blood pressure. He had chronic gout, and his heart was failing, and he had diabetes, and on and cataracts and the whole 9 yards. He was on 17 medications a day and 35 to 40 units of insulin. And he was told by his doctor that he probably had about 2 years to live. He was in that bad of shape. And he was also told that every one of these diseases was a progressive, irreversible disease, that there was nothing he could do to change the course of these diseases. He just had to take his pills and, just survive as long as he could. And within less than a year on a whole food plant-based diet, he was off every single medication and all of his insulin. Every disease.
You must have been so happy.
Every disease reversed. Whoa. They did a PET scan. His heart went from being severely diseased to having no sign of cardiac disease. His diabetes went away. His fasting sugar was absolutely normal in fairly short order. His A1C became like 5.1. Blood pressure 115/70 with no medications. Wow. They couldn't control it on two or three medications before that. Not one more recurrence of gout. Just everything corrected. And he went into his doctor and he said, "Why didn't you tell me that all I had to do was change my diet and I could reverse all of these diseases? You told me they were progressive, irreversible diseases." And the doctor looked at him and he said, "I didn't tell you because I didn't know." He said, "If you would have told me that this was possible, I would have laughed at you. Yeah. I wouldn't have believed you." Yeah. But he said, Now I know. Now I know.
And there's two things from that story that stick out to me. One is that that's not an isolated case. That's what happens to so many people with high blood pressure on all these medications,
absolutely.
suffering in all these ways. That's not an isolated instance. That is the norm, basically.
It is. If you clean up your diet, start to exercise, this is something we see over and over and over again. And because your body is quite, it wants to heal itself. Your body doesn't want to degenerate and be riddled with disease. It wants to be healthy. It just needs the building blocks to do that.
Yeah.
And so making the right choices is so powerful.
And works. And the second thing from that story, the other norm is that most doctors have no idea.
Yeah.
So why is that?
It's because nutrition isn't considered a priority in school. It's considered, most physicians think these diseases are chronic, irreversible. It's not your fault. And really, it's not your fault. It's the fault of our culture and our society that has, all of these people manufacturing foods that will, get you to reach this bliss point of, ultra palatable foods that you can't stop eating. And they're everywhere in front of you, luring you. We've created this obesogenic environment that's lethal to people. And the only way that's going to stop is by saying, I don't want this stuff. I don't want to do this to myself.
Yeah, I'm going to go the other path.
That's right.
Once you're aware there's another path, walk it.
Yeah, and the really good news is that I know it's scary because you love the food you're eating, but I can guarantee you will love the new food just as much, if not more. Because there's nothing like the most perfect ripe mango or a fresh blueberry, or when your palate adjusts to the flavors of real food, they taste incredible.
Absolutely. You appreciate it on a whole nother level.
And the other good news is that young doctors going through med school right now actually care about this stuff. They're getting interested. We've got people like Michael Clapper going into medical schools and teaching young physicians. And so for me, that's really encouraging. Not so many years ago was the very first Plantation Project conference, American College of Lifestyle Medicine conference, and they were getting 100 people. Now they have to shut it down at 1,200. And this is mostly physicians going to these conferences to learn about nutrition and how to actually help their patients overcome chronic diseases instead of just putting a band-aid on these diseases.
Yeah, and causing more problems with all these medications.
Exactly.
It just seems so, it's almost like a conspiracy theory. It seems so strange that there's this solution for all these diseases, the most common ones in our society, and yet the people that we go to help heal us don't even know how to do it. And there's a very clear way how to do it, and it's been tried and tested and shown over and over and over again that it works, and yet still it's not in their curriculum to learn about nutrition.
No, and the reality, of course, is that nutrition is very influenced by industry. Nutrition education messages have been for eons very much influenced by industry, and in medicine, it's very influenced by the pharmaceutical industry.
Right.
And so doctors are trained by the pharmaceutical industry. And we need to recognize that, and they need to recognize that.
Yeah,
and
that should be illegal.
Absolutely. I think that individuals, as people trying to seek healthcare, we have a right to at least have the options laid out on the table. So you could do this medication for the rest of your life. It'll lower your cholesterol 5 or 10%, and you will probably still die of heart disease, but at a little slower rate. Or you could do this diet, a whole food plant-based diet, lower your cholesterol by 30 or 40%, and reverse your heart disease. But we often, those options aren't laid out in that way. And then we also need, obviously, if it's a prescription you choose, the doctor writes a prescription, here's your meds. We need to be able to write a prescription for a lifestyle medicine. Yeah. And here's the clinic you're going to go to learn how to cook healthy foods and how to shop and how to prepare and how to exercise and how to live a healthier lifestyle.
And that's a much easier thing to learn than to learn how to live with 17 medications a day and a terminal illness.
Yeah, get your chest cracked open and get another stent, and you know, it's just miserable.
You know, you said that it seems scary to change your diet, but it's much scarier to have a life-threatening illness.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, and don't wait until that time to change your diet.
No.
Prevent that, which
That's
is
right.
what the power of this diet can do.
Yeah, and so many people, you know, wave the banner of freedom. I want to be free to eat what I want to eat and smoke what I want to smoke or whatever. But what they have to understand is when you develop a chronic disease, your freedom is instantly snatched away. When you're hooked up to a dialysis machine, you have no freedom. You know, and that's the road you're going down when you develop diabetes or heart disease, especially diabetes. You know, dialysis is so common for people with diabetes. You can't, you know, you want to go for a hike, you want to do something fun. You're in chains, literally, when you have these diseases. You can't enjoy the simple things in life. So, you know, the freedom to eat what you want to eat, you have to understand your palate changes. And you will love, you really will love the food.
Absolutely.
Give yourself a month and, you know, go to True North.
Try it out. Because it takes a little while to change. I remember even when I changed from eating sort of junk food, processed vegan food, to deciding, okay, I want to be healthier now. And, you know, I've gone through stages over the years.
Yep.
But initially, after eating junk food, I'm eating this whole foods diet thinking, it's not really nice. I'm craving these, you know, high fat foods, high sugar foods.
Yeah.
But after a few days or a week or sometimes even a little bit longer, but then I'm thinking, wow, this food is so much better than what I was eating. I'm so much more satisfied by this. That other food disgusts me now. I don't want to eat that.
You know what? It does. Like I'll put something in my mouth that, you know, that's sweet, and it's gross. I don't
it doesn't
like
taste nice at all.
It doesn't taste good, or fatty. You know, your mouth gets coated with like a potato
Oil.
chip or something. It tastes just, for me, it's just disgusting. It's not even food.
And everybody's taste buds can change.
Yes, absolutely. It takes about 3 to 4 weeks, I would say.
Right, excellent. You mentioned that people on dialysis, it's like they're in chains. Do you find that it's interesting, or that there's some sort of correlation with us keeping animals in chains, with us cutting animals open, and then we need to be cut open because we eat those animals? Does that sound like there's some sort of strange pattern there to you?
Yeah, I mean, it's payback, it seems.
Yeah.
Like it just, when we think about what we as human beings are doing to animals, to me, it's some people would say it's like karma or something. But we can't expect to be imprisoning and torturing animals and then eating their flesh and it not having some adverse consequences. I mean, it may sound a little airy-fairy, but I really do believe that there is a huge impact when we create pain, suffering, and death needlessly.
Needlessly is the key word.
And you know what? It's not just needlessly. To our own peril as well.
Sure.
So there, you know, when you think about it, why would we as a species cause such agony in other species when it is not only unnecessary, we are harming ourselves, our planet, the future for our grandchildren in the process. It makes no sense.
Yeah, and that's the point. It's actually not airy-fairy because it's a fact. When we do this to them, it happens to us.
Yes.
And it is at our own detriment and totally unnecessary, and a better path is possible and shown to work countless times.
Yeah.
And
absolutely,
that's what we're both working on, trying to get everyone to see.
Yes.
So you've been advocating for decades the many health benefits of a plant-based diet, and that's for the health benefits, but you also believe in the ethical concerns surrounding what we do to animals, and you've been vegan a long time as well. So how long have you been vegan, and why did you go vegan?
I've been predominantly vegan 99% or more for about 30 years. And it was interesting because I lived in Northern Ontario when I went pretty much 100% plant-based. Northern Ontario, I had met one real live vegetarian in my entire life. There were no vegetarians around. Mm-hmm. And I was a dietitian, and dietitians, I didn't think there were any vegetarian dietitians. There were within the Seventh-day Adventist world, and a few here and there. Yep. But I had never met one. Right. And I was a public health nutritionist, and so everything that I taught with was based on, food groups and meat and dairy and so on. But what happened to me was my husband and I have been married over 40 years now. As we were transitioning our own diet to be healthier and eating more lentils and tofu and so on, less and less meat, we were just gradually going more plant-based. I had a very dear friend who was, he was actually our best man at our wedding. He was on his way deer hunting. And I remember him giving me a call and saying, can I stop over for a coffee on my way deer hunting? Mm-hmm. And I remember thinking to myself, how can I stop him from killing another deer? Wow. And so when he arrived, I, served him the coffee, and I said, I don't understand why you do this. Like, why would you go into the bush with a big gun and shoot a beautiful, innocent animal who just wants to live? Like, why would you do that? And I said, the only thing I can see is it's this macho thing. It makes you feel more manly or something. Yeah. It was his response to me that changed the course of my life. Wow. Yeah. He said, Brenda, he said, just because you don't have the guts to pull the trigger does not mean you are not responsible for the trigger being pulled every time you buy your piece of meat camouflaged in cellophane in a grocery store. He said, at least the animals I eat have had a life. He said, do you think you could say the same for the ones that are sitting on your plate? And I was silenced. I was silenced. Because it was the first time anyone had ever forced me to take responsibility for the food that I was eating. And I thought about it, and I ordered articles, and I read and read and read, and it took me about a week to think, I can't contribute to this system of cruelty any longer. Mm-hmm. And I was scared. I was scared because I had a family, a young family. I had a profession that was so meat and dairy dominated. And I liked my profession. I didn't want to leave my profession. And I wasn't sure how my husband would feel about my desire to eliminate animal products. And I can remember going to him and saying to him, I want to become completely vegetarian. I don't want to do this to animals anymore. And I said, would you be willing to become a vegetarian with me? And at that time, we didn't even know the word vegan, barely. And he looked at me, he smiled, and he said, I thought you'd never ask. What? Yes. Oh, he said, I would love to be a vegetarian. He said, I always thought it would be so cool to be a vegetarian because he said, I was putting bricks in the back of the toilet when I was a kid to try to preserve water. There's no better way of protecting the planet than being a vegetarian. I would love to do that.
Whoa, what a surprise.
I thought, wow, did I ever pick well?
You certainly did. Sounds like it.
And so we just, zoomed forward. And I remember thinking to myself, will I be ousted from my profession? But what ended up happening is I ended up being embraced as the expert on plant-based nutrition for my profession. I just said to myself, I know I'm going to be a little bit on the fringe and I'll be judged, but I'm going to make sure every I is dotted and every T is crossed. I'm going to know my stuff, so nobody can say that I'm not accurate in what I say. And so I just made sure I knew my stuff. And it's been a wonderful experience. And I'm so excited to see all of the young dietitians and physicians coming out now who are plant-based and who are on the team and making such a difference.
Yeah.
And
Very exciting.
I mean, it's very exciting. I don't know that I'll ever retire, but I am just embracing all of this young, wonderful, brilliant talent that's coming on board.
Yeah, the whole world could change, and I also feel the same, that while this job needs to be done, getting on people on this diet for whatever reason, there's so many reasons to get people on this diet, then we will just want to continue doing it. Can I tell you one more
story?
Yeah.
I want to tell you one more story, because this one I think you'll appreciate.
Can I ask about that story that you just told me a little bit?
Yes, absolutely.
What about the best man? Has he...
No, not at all. He still hunts.
He still hunts and everything. Some people just won't change.
And he's still a friend. I mean...
Yeah. But he just hasn't...
No,
What a shame.
It is a shame.
Oh, well, it's still not too late for him either.
Yeah, that's for sure. He's got heart disease.
Oh, damn.
So...
That's a shame. And even still, he isn't open to switching his diet?
No.
Wow. Well... Okay.
I keep trying.
Keep trying. You never know. He might surprise you one day.
Yeah, that's right.
What's the other story?
So the other story I want to tell, just because it's fun to share, is when my son was about 3 years old, and we became completely plant-based when he was about a year. So he was about 3 years old, and we were in the car driving by McDonald's. And he looked at me and he said, "Mommy, could we have a McDonald's hamburger?" And I looked at him and I thought...
You were vegetarian and everything.
Yes.
Yeah.
I thought, you know what? It's time. I need to explain to him why we don't eat McDonald's hamburgers.
Yeah.
And so I looked at him and I said, "Honey," I said, we don't eat McDonald's hamburgers." I knew he saw the commercials of the Hamburglar stealing the hamburgers from trees.
Yeah.
So I'm sure he thought they grew on trees. But I said to him, I said, "Honey,
wow.
hamburgers..."
That's propaganda right
there.
there.
Oh, for sure. Their hamburgers are made of cows. And he looked at me with this look and he said, "Mommy, people do not eat cows." Like it was the stupidest thing he'd ever heard in his life.
Yeah.
And I was silent for a moment, thinking of how to respond. And he said, "Do they, Mommy? Do they?" And I said, "Yes, they do." And he looked at me and the tears were coming down his cheeks. And he said, "But Mommy, them have eyes." He said, "Don't they know that cows are people too?"
Wow.
And I thought,
They don't.
isn't that amazing how young children just get it?
Yeah,
They
it
just
is.
get it. I remember we actually did go to McDonald's not that long after that, because his best friend had his birthday party there. And they had salads and they had vegetarian pizza, and I thought, well, you could have, I guess, some vegetarian pizza. And anyway, he got to the front of the lineup and he asked the lady for a hamburger with no cows inside.
Cool. That's the only way to have them, in my opinion.
Oh, so...
That's so interesting. That revelation that he had, don't they realize that cows are people too?
Yeah.
Even as a vegan of 5 years now, it took me still a long time being vegan to realize that they are people too.
Yeah.
I just thought, let's not hurt the animals, they deserve to be respected and everything.
Yeah.
But now I very much try to get a message out there that they are people of a different species,
Yes.
with their own communities.
Their own unique personalities, their love for their offspring, and what we do to them
Oh my God.
is unjustifiable. There's
Disgraceful.
nothing that will ever justify
Absolutely
what we do
not. Absolutely
to these
not.
creatures.
Yeah, I completely agree. Well, thank you so much for all the people you're helping, all the animals you're helping, the benefits to the environment, everything that comes from you advocating this message. Very appreciative. Where can people find out more about your work?
Well, first of all, I'll say thank you for what you're doing. I'm so grateful because I'm not very good at social media things, and I'm so grateful for the young people that are coming up and just doing an amazing job, and you're definitely a leader among them, so thank you.
Yeah, it's great to have this opportunity to spread the message to so many people every single day. It is, it's very
Wonderful.
special.
And my you know, I have a website, brendadavisrd.com,
Yep.
RD for registered dietitian, and I also have many books that are, you know, available on Amazon.
I'll link your website in the description below, and anybody who wants to learn more about Brenda or buy any of those books, there's 11 books, so have a look through them. That's awesome in itself. Thank you so much for your time today. Greatly appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
My pleasure.